Welcome to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL 950 AM 100.3 FM. You can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. And you can spread the word, let people know where they can find us at Catholic Audio Media or on their favorite podcast platform, including their favorite smart speaker. All you have to do is say, play Catholic Audio Media Podcast. And it should come up. Everything does for me. So anyway, check it out. And your favorite podcast platform, whatever that may be, iHeart, Amazon. Also, as I said, the smart speakers. You can also hear it from Reason FM. You can hear, it should be able to, there was a little switch with Apple, but you should still be able to hear us from Apple and all these different podcasts. So tune us in. And let other people know where you heard us. Now, David Pinault is continuing his interview today, and he is wrote the introduction to the book from Ignatius Press, Charles de Foucault. It is the second edition. It comes from the author Jean-Jacques Antier, and so that's from Ignatius Press. Please check it out. In the meantime, do know that we are here every single Monday through Friday, and we're going to continue for today and tomorrow our interview with David Pinault and telling us all about Charles de Foucault. We're going to talk more about his issue with, or his ministry with languages. Let's switch over. He lived for a while as a hermit.
Yes, and it's interesting that he did not go. I mean, I kind of telescoped his life when he came back to France. He experimented for a while. He was in the Cistercian Trappist order. Mm-hmm. He went to the Holy Land and worked as a kind of humble laborer for a while, for various convents and monasteries and so forth. And then eventually came back, as I mentioned, to French North Africa. And what I see at work as he sort of developed his vocation, I see at work a couple of kinds. One is that once he had rediscovered Christ and the centrality of Christ in his life, mm-hmm. what Foucault really wanted was simply to spend his time in private adoration. One of his favorite activities on a daily basis was worshiping before the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Wow. He had a small chapel, really, I guess you'd call it sort of a hut-like, where at Tamanrasset and the other places that he lived in Algeria, where he would spend the night in prayer before the monstrance, before the consecrated host, and he would often sleep there, curled up, before the altar, on the ground, basically. He described himself as, curled up like a dog, he says. Wow. A dog for Christ. A dog for Christ. Yeah. But here's the thing. That was his sort of natural inclination. But he constantly made himself available so that, the soldiers, local Muslims, and what we could call the indigenous population, and anyone, mm-hmm. Christian, non-Christian, Muslim, whatever, were welcome to come find them, ask for help, whether it was for basic medical needs or spiritual or just conversation. And so that availability to others was something that was not easy for him, and that's important to realize, because I think the temptation for us is to say, oh, that person's a saint, that person's holy. Well, I guess that was just them, but I'm no saint, it's just, so we tend to think there's a radical gulf between someone like Father Foucault and ourselves. And that's a mistake. The more that I studied his life, the more I realized that what you see at work is a discipline and a practice. And I think the first step in that kind of practice can involve just asking ourselves, what kind of use am I making of my time? Am I letting myself be distracted infinitely? He went through that himself, and gradually freed himself of distractions. And of course, the more empty-handed you become that way, the less burdened you are by distractions like that, the freer that you are, the more energy you have to devote yourself to what's truly important. And he knew what was truly important. That was the focus on Christ.
Focus on Christ.
But yeah, and in doing that at the same time, he realized that, okay, I have this intense love for God, especially for God's Son. Mm-hmm. How do I manifest that? I manifest it the same way that Christ himself did, service to others. And that's really where the patriotism comes in. He loved his country, France, and the way that he wanted to show that was by making himself available to the inhabitants of the French Empire. And he saw himself as imitating Christ in doing that.
Wow. Well, and obviously he spoke several languages.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes. And yes. He would be able to do that. And just what you said, just anyone who comes by.
Yeah. Yes. And that, and of course, that language acquisition itself, from his point of view, was part of the ministry. And it's wonderful to see how he would, set out, to learn these languages. And keep in mind that the time that, he was operating in the late 19th, early 20th century, it's not as if, like, for example, in addition to studying Arabic and Hebrew, for example, he set out to learn Tuareg, which is one of the indigenous languages in that part of North Africa. He was the person who wrote one of the very first dictionaries of that language.
Really?
And yeah, so, he had to learn his instruction, by, talking to members of the local population and figuring out, okay, how do I transcribe what that person just said, so it's not like you could just pick up a handy grammar book or,
right.
sit down in front of the computer and look up a YouTube channel. This was a discipline in itself.
So did he create the written language that is Tuareg as well?
What he was able to do was to transcribe there are actually a number of local languages that are related to this family. So to get into the weeds here, you'll see that there are actually a number of languages related to this. So what he would do is, because some of these dialects of, these are, the Arabic is a Semitic language, and then there's a family called Hamitic languages. And languages like Berber and Tuareg belong to that family, and some of them have a script of their own, which is different from Arabic. And what he would do would be to transcribe what he would hear into Roman letters, like English, and then translate it into French. So very useful guide. And all of that is just a way of saying that the kind of intense focus he was able to bring to these studies, in his mind, was all linked to the service of Christ, because what he was hoping to do was to be able to build bridges to these cultures. And his way of being a missionary was to follow the example of St. Francis. Preach the gospel at all times, when necessary, use words. And right. In other words, living a life of charity among the poorest and most vulnerable populations was his way of being a missionary, in the sense that, he would, for example, offer mass, for, the French soldiers, the Foreign Legion, and so forth. And anyone who wanted to could stop by. But he was not trying to, talk Muslims or other indigenous populations into becoming Christian, but his life acted as a kind of beacon that attracted, the interest and the curiosity of a lot of the population. So he saw the language work as a way to, to be building those bridges.
And that would have been very Christ-like in itself. I could see Jesus doing doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very, very much so.
You're listening to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL 950 AM 100.3 FM. And you can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. We'll be right back right after this. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com. And you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. And don't forget, we are here every single Monday through Friday, and you can also hear us at our website, CatholicAudiomedia.com. And we're going to continue our interview with David Pinault tomorrow. He wrote the introduction to the book, Charles de Foucault, actually spelled it F-O-U-C-A-U-L-D, F-A-U-C-A-U-L-D, second edition. It's from Ignatius Press, and the author is Jean-Jacques Antier. So if you're interested in that book, please look it up over at Ignatius Press. You can also find it, I'm sure, at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores online, and also in, well, I don't know what you call it, the real world, I guess. Although, obviously, Amazon's on the real world, and so is Barnes & Noble. But you know what I mean. The brick-and-mortar stores. That's the word I was looking for. So anyway, we're going to talk more with David Pinault tomorrow. We're going to have an interview with him much further in the future. I'm reading his latest book, Providence Blue, which takes place in Providence, Rhode Island. He told me about it, so I'm going to read this and I'm going to interview you. So that'll be coming long in the future after I read the book. But in the meantime, let us remember we'll be back here tomorrow. Have yourself a blessed day, and we'll talk more tomorrow. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.